Do you want another one?
Right. Hello. So this is Virtually Connecting, and we're connecting with Eurocool 2018 in Finland, in a place called, I think, Givälska. My name is Simon Ensor, and I'm speaking from Clermont-Ferrand in France, my daughter's bedroom, so that's why it's pink. Okay, so we're going to go straight to Finland, and we're going to have a quick introduction of everybody in Finland, and then we'll introduce the virtual folks. So over to you in Givälska.
So I'm going to ask everybody in the room here to teach you how to say Jyväskylä.
Jyväskylä.
No, we don't have enough time.
Jyväskylä.
Brilliant. I think we all pronounce it differently.
The truth. So can we have some introductions from perhaps Kate, if you start?
Hello, Susanna Nocchi. I'm Italian, but I'm placed in Dublin at the Dublin Institute of Technology, teach Italian and do research in Cork.
Fantastic.
Hello, I'm Sylvie Touesny. I'm French. I'm the president of researchpublishing.net. We'll be looking at this short paper for this year conference.
Super.
I'm Karina. I don't think nationality is relevant. I am Korean, I'm European. I'm the project manager at researchpublishing.net, and again, we'll be doing the short paper, so any question on that? Go for it.
Yeah. Shall I? Oh, we've got one at the back.
No,
Not me.
Hi, my name is Parisa, which is very easy, Paris plus A. I'm from Iran.
We've lost it. Say that again, Parisa.
Hi, I'm Kate Borthwick. I'm from the University of Southampton in the UK, and my life at the moment is mostly...
Okay, we have a bit of breaking up there.
And I've also just been voted onto the Eurocool Executive Board.
Congratulations.
Is that me? Hi, I'm Alessia Plutino, and I teach Italian at the University of Southampton. I've been dealing with a project relating to MOOCs, and I'm interested in anything to do with technology and languages, and I'm getting into gamification this year. I'm very excited about learning about that.
Right.
My turn.
Save the best till last.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
I'm surrounded by women too. Not bad at 6 o'clock on a Friday here, local time. So I think nationality does matter here because I'm the odd one out, not just being a man, but I'm also, of course, we have got a man, or at least one man, I think, online, because I'm the Southern Hemisphere representative. And proudly a Kiwi from New Zealand living in Dublin.
Fantastic. And Helen?
And I'm the virtual Canadian in the crowd. I'm in Central Ontario, where it's a beautiful sunny day. And I teach teacher candidates or pre-service teachers. So not a linguist, but definitely languages.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Apostolos Koutropoulos, but everybody knows me as AK. I am at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and I work for the Applied Linguistics Department. Even though I've only been a member of Eurocool briefly, I've been reading Recall through my university library for quite some time now. Lots of interesting stuff.
Great. Okay. So without any waiting, I thought we'd launch a first question. So I spoke with Teresa about this a bit earlier. So the question for all of you is Eurocool 2018, so what?
Would anybody like to take that to start us off? What's going to change after this conference?
Well, I was just going to say to the so what, actually. To the so what, just to say what a wonderful conference we've had, and the fact that we've had people from 30 countries. I think the list was more than 30 countries here, and what a fun and friendly conference it is. We're sharing lots of ideas about different ways we're using technology in our research and in our teaching, our language teaching and learning. But I think mostly we're having a lot of fun, aren't we?
There's been a lot of fun this year so far.
Yeah, talking to people. And I think the so what is we need to keep talking to people and discussing ideas and taking those ideas forward and working out what we can do with them.
If I pick an event, a workshop, even a professional development workshop. So fun is an acronym because I encourage a lot of fun, and I think there has been a lot of fun here. But as an acronym, the first thing is, what's the fundamental point you're taking away? Secondly, what's the new understanding that you have that you didn't before you came? And then lastly, the N is, what's the new thing you're going to do as a consequence when you get back? So I use that as a bit of a measure of anything I do, of the impact, if you like. So I'm probably hardly the one to judge whether the fun has really lived out and will live and continue beyond the conference.
Good answer.
I think I'll take one on behalf of research publishing on that one. It's like, so what now? Well, we've got the short paper coming out in a couple of months. So for anybody that weren't there to actually attend the sessions and to know about the new research that's being worked on at the moment, the papers will be out in a couple of months. And I think that's great for anybody that couldn't actually be here, virtually or otherwise, to just kind of watch that space. That's my point on that one. Be quiet.
I think it's also what I'm taking away this year is an awareness of how education is changing and how teaching and learning is changing, and how we as educators are becoming aware of this and trying to look at things more critically. It's not a time to stop, it's a time to stop and reflect, but with in mind looking ahead at the future. And I think, Mark, you mentioned a few things we should be looking and be scared about in terms of the changes that are happening. And I think the fact that we have to look critically at everything which is which we as educators become exposed to, it's extremely important.
That critical digital literacy is
that's what I was really I've been reflecting about that quite a lot, and I think the keynotes really brought that forward this year. And I think it's something that is happening all over in applied linguistics, generally speaking. Eventually, the applied linguists are well, I'm sure we realized it before, but we're becoming more and more aware of the fact that it is important to be political, and in that I mean, as a social being, and to as we work with language, and language is life and it's political, everything you say and how you use language, and as so that we have to be aware of that, and we probably need to use it in a way that can have an impact. I believe that's my own belief, as a or an applied linguist who works with technology. Then there's all the digital literacy aspect of it, and I think digital literacies are much more than digital skills, and that's something that we have to make our students aware of, the way they use the technology and what it is behind that and what it means to use the technology, have a digital presence in every language and in every culture, because it may change depending on the culture that you communicate in. So I think this is something that it was at the back of my mind, and it's now being brought forward more and more, even especially through this conference.
I mean, Mark's helped really bring that forward, I think, from the conference. shouting from the back of the room. But I think it's really a really good example of that is that the language community for some years now has looked at open access publishing as being a critical part of what we do to make sure that those people who can't get through the paywalls can still read the literature and can still get involved in the field. So the research publishing are here because they're a really great example of how we can make critical decisions that ensure that our fields are not closed, and that we, you know, as a community, we can cross those borders and barriers, and no matter where you are or whether you're part of an institution or not, you can still get involved in the academic discussions. But it's not just that, it's every choice we make, and choices of tools as well.
For me, as a little bit of an outsider, I'm not a member of the professional association, but I'm on a number of executives of other associations. The comment about being political that operates at the micro level and the meso and the macro level. And I think it underscores the changes taking place, the role that professional bodies have, not just with their members, but in an advocacy capacity, outwardly, externally, and using the reputation, the status of your body to be able to say things about changes. And in the European context, when a professional body might talk about with concern, of course, when you're talking to the European Commission, you always want to couch things in a positive and a negative. You don't want to just be negative, but there are things happening. And I shared in my keynote today the very instrumentalist approach that's been adopted, in my view, to digital literacy or literacies. There's a framework for teachers as well, with loses sight of the bigger picture. And the core definition actually originally comes from the UK and GIST's work about preparing people to live and learn and earn in society effectively. Actually, I'm going to offend some people now, but our societies are fucked. Less than 50% of the world have access to the internet. The societies we're preparing people for, just last year, we were told from a reputable source that 8 men living in North America now own 50% of the wealth of the developing world. That's the world we're preparing people for. And if all we do is prepare them to participate instead of shape and change, then we're doing a great disservice, because we'll just continue to get what we've got. And we've been very successful in education in amplifying and reproducing privilege.
That's I'm so glad you said that. that makes the so what factor even more important, doesn't it?
And to give you an example, I'm sorry if I'm dominating a bit of the microphone here, but to give you an example, for me, the two big forces at work in education at the moment, which I didn't make explicit in my talk, there's only so much you can cover, but the unbundling movement. I referred to micro-credentialing, but unbundling, drawing out of the business literature and how Uber and iTunes have fundamentally changed services and products. Education is not a product, nor is it a service. It's a co-construction. So the unbundling in education doesn't work in the same way, but it still is a very important force. And the second is the openness movement. And if I didn't believe that every one of us has the agency to make change, I may as well just give up and go away. And my own university only 3 weeks ago is the first in Ireland to adopt an open access press. And we've developed a partnership with UCL, University College London, that did this a year or so ago. And I think they're celebrating 2 million downloads, something like that. It goes beyond that, because UCL being a sort of a top 10, top 20 university in the world, if depending which measure you take, if you don't change promotion criteria and some of the other ways in which academic work is recognized, then you're really not necessarily doing much of a service. You might be disseminating, exchanging knowledge more, information. But UCL has done that as well. And in my capacity, one virtual brick, if you like, at a time, that's the next step for the role that I play in trying to affect change. And sometimes that change is very subtle. I was using an ecological metaphor, where it's a complex ecology that we work in. And sometimes it's the subcultures that work against things, but understanding what levers are most powerful at affecting change. And sadly, promotion matters a lot in most organizations, and it's a driver for people. It might not be the right driver, but unfortunately, it's often used as a funnel for institutions to maintain control for all sorts of reasons. So we'll wait and see. In a year's time, I'd like to think that we've then changed the promotion criteria, because only having an access press, open access press, and then still saying that your publication has to be cited in Scopus and it has to be from some top tier journal, when actually thousands of people have read it in an open access way, that's impact to me.
You made a really interesting point in your keynote as well, around two worldviews using the same language, and how a lot of the buzzwords that we're talking about. So I took as I watched the little video that you showed us, and there were gasps in the crowd of horror, as being sort of micro-credentialing and blockchain sort of references, locking people in to a system that, which is the system really we don't want to know about, or we don't want to, the way that we don't want to go, and yet we use open badges, we use digital open badges as a motivator. So that's where the danger is. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, and how do we affect change effectively?
So this sounds like a cop-out to say it's so complex. And again, if we just resign ourselves to saying it's too complex to make a difference, you heard what I said earlier, but the micro-credentialing movement, which is part of the unbundling, is very powerful and could be used in extremely enabling, almost empowering ways. Equally, it can be used to create this global marketplace where the learner uses the supermarket metaphor to have a piece of this and a piece of that. And it's very hard to argue against that, because isn't that learner-centered? And the language of learner-centered actually is frequently cited out to justify these sorts of initiatives. For me, every word matters. It probably should for linguists as well. I hardly ever use the word learner-centered. I talk about learning-centered. I consider it an oxymoron for a large institution to be able to be learner-centered. By its very nature, it's institutionally centered. And it might have an aspiration to be learner-centered, but my own institution has that, but it's not true. You have to comply to the systems and so on. Learning-centered means that you're focusing on what's best for the learner and learning. And sometimes, direct instruction can be the best thing for a learner. If they haven't got the mechanics of language, that's probably one of the most efficient ways to get them to the point to use it. Stand to be corrected here. So I probably lost a little bit of the track, the video and the unbundling. My own institution is going down this path with MOOCs, to the point that today we signed quite a significant contract with our MOOC provider, probably the same as a couple of people in the room, where we'll be offering degrees through the platform, as well as micro degrees. And in New Zealand, only 2 weeks ago, actually 10 days ago, our qualifications body has recognized micro-credentials. And they haven't got quite the framework or language yet, but I think the thing that Europe has over recognizing people from North America, the European credit transfer system gives us the mechanism to recognize credit for other things that feed into. And so MOOCs, I made the comment, as particularly my North American colleagues, this may or may not resonate, but most of my colleagues in the US kind of MOOCs are ancient history. That is not the case in Europe. And the work that I've been involved in and the research where we've compared actually the drivers in the US versus Europe, the drivers in Europe are, it seems, largely are still linked to that noble goal of lifelong learning, which has been a deep tradition in Europe. Now, the United Kingdom might be a little exception to some of what I'm saying here, but in continental Europe, so the European Commission, certainly in the funding they've provided for alternative delivery models, that's much more what's driving it, not institutional profile and branding. Of course, the two are not completely mutually exclusive. So creating pathways for learners, that's where MOOCs, I think, have been very influential in this part of the world. And as I'm reporting, my own institution is seeing and wanting, in fact, to lead in that space rather than have it done to us.
I have a little question about all of that. Is it not a trap? I fear that this micro-credentialing business is more business than human-centered.
So I have a good comeback, I think, for that. It might not kind of really have a lot of substance, but I've had to think very carefully in my own institution and what we do in this space. And I made the comment in the keynote, dichotomies are always problematic, but largely we're told that education is in crisis or education is in change. And as educators and institutions, we have to respond to these changes. Society has changed. First and foremost, that smacks of technologically deterministic language. Technology comes out of society. It's a microcosm of society, and society and technology change together. Nonetheless, there are changes taking place, and we would all acknowledge that. So therefore, my comeback, if you like, on what we do about it is, it's an Irish expression, I've been told, but it's a nice expression. If you're not around the table, then typically you're on the menu. So we want to be around the table, shaping the change rather than being on the menu. And so, and looking to the changes and the change forces, some of which are imbued with neoliberalist sort of viewpoints, globalization, whatever that might mean, because it has so many variations, such as neoliberalism does. We've consciously and intentionally made the decision, and even the partners that we've selected, to be able to influence where this might go. Now, whether we're dreaming and whether we're, victims of hegemonic kind of forces ourselves, time will tell. But I suppose ultimately it's about that sense of agency and willingness to embrace some change and direct it in some way. And in many respects, the work that I do, and I have a luxury of being in the center of the university to help change the institutional culture. I can't personally change it on my own, that's for sure, and it would be risky if any one person did try to do it. But just as those examples I've given already, things like promotion drivers, one little thing at a time can add up, one would like to think.
I'm hoping I can jump in. Just a couple of pieces that you've been talking about, very interesting threads to connect. So you talked about organizations like Eurocall that have a responsibility to become not political, but present in a global sense, to build connections with other organizations. Places at the conference level where conversations are happening that need to be happening, say, beyond, like this one, beyond the walls of the conference. And then the third thread that you just talked about is that responsibility that we have as educators to bring that context to the students, because we want our students to be at the table as well. So how do we invite our students into that agency so that they can bring their own chair? Mahab Ali talks about bringing her chair to the table because she necessarily doesn't have a chair, so she's bringing her own chair to the table rather than being on the menu. So how do you build those from your university or from your context, from your organizations that are maybe different in the European context that they might be in a North American context or Canadian context?
I've had a simple, sorry, I'm answering the question, but if I had the simple answer to that question, I'd probably be very wealthy. And in the context that I work within, it's interesting because there is a cultural dimension to this. And it may resonate with you in Canada and probably North America if we gross generalizations here, sweeping generalizations. But my ancestry is actually Irish. Fanny was 17 and Oliver was 21. They'd been married for 3 weeks when they left to go to New Zealand to create a better life. They were destitute effectively. And coming from a country that's a young country where we established the country in very strong egalitarian principles, I feel very at home here in Finland, to be quite honest. There's so many things that are very similar that we somehow in my DNA, it could even be genetic, you could argue, there's a sense that I see myself, and not in an arrogant, I hope, way, but as a future maker. And living in Ireland, a country that equally has been colonized, but over centuries of oppression, and the team that I work with, it's very hard to get them to embrace the sense that I'm a future maker, as distinct from a future taker, I think I described. And so there are even subtle things that I say to people, how can we do it this way? And people will say, well, we've always done it that way. And in some respects, this might be the benefits of internationalization, very distinct from globalization, is it takes someone else to see some of this, and I can say things that local people can't. And I see it as my role to say that. Now, I've been in Dublin for 4.5 years, so that now that's worn a little thin, but I still take it upon myself to call out some of these things. And in the Ireland, now I'm really stretching this, but Ireland is a nation that I think history will show this period that I've lived is part of its real growing up. The Pope happens to be in Dublin tomorrow. And that is very different from what would have happened the last time the Pope came to Ireland. Very mixed response. Ireland, of course, voted for gay marriage, the first country in the world to vote, put that to a referendum, and only a matter of months ago also had a referendum on abortion. So these are all signs of taking more agency and self-control. So I take that as really positive because I claim full responsibility for this, but joking aside. So those are very loose connections, but I use the term mindsets. And I like the word mindset because, you know, some of our work as educators is the almost smash mindsets, like concrete and smash it and start again. But mindsets are linked to beliefs. And if we see some of the beliefs and values that are playing out, particularly the distinction between North American, and I'll distinguish here between the United States, because Canada is very different. It's like New Zealand, as distinct from the values of Europe. And there's a lovely survey that's done. I use the word lovely deliberately here. Pew Research do this survey every 3 years, I think it is, on values between European values and US values. And they ask a question, what would you rather have? The freedom to pursue, and present company accepted with our, was it Boston colleague here, but would you rather have the freedom to pursue your own goals as you see appropriate, or would you rather have a society where everyone has equal opportunity? And the results of that survey are basically inversed from the European countries to the United States. Now, of course, this is not that simple, but I made the distinction here between education as a public good, whereas in other countries in the world, which is enshrined, with the exception of the United Kingdom, in European values, as distinct from countries like the United States, Australia, New Zealand, sadly, where education has become a private commodity. I'm just stopping now because I'm conscious I'm talking a lot. So come in, others.
I'm going to throw a word out that I've been reading and coming across, because as linguists, you're very conscious of the word choices, the word cosmopolitan. And maybe some of the other people that are there, has the word cosmopolitan come up in conversations at the conference in any way?
No, I haven't heard that word used except for the drink. I mean, I haven't really heard it used for a very long time. Actually, that's an interesting word to come up with.
There's a very nice paper by an academic from Australia, Alan Luke, who uses cosmopolitan, drawing on the philosopher Kant, is it? And so I'm familiar with the concept of, in today's globalized world, it's the dead opposite of globalization. It's about almost being a citizen of the world and the responsibilities and rights that come with that. So that resonates a lot with me, because I see myself as a citizen of the world, to be honest. Because what the decisions we make, whether that be individuals, collectively, affect the rest of the rest of humanity. And the decisions right now we're making, I think the rest, and this might sound a bit too grand, but I personally believe it, that humanity's future is at stake now. That's how big these tensions and battles really are.
I don't think you can overstate that either. I think that's just so true. Simon, I'm just giving you a warning. Don't worry, he knows what I look like. That on site, folks are going to be making their way to the conference dinner very soon. So we're going to have to leave. We could start to wrap up.
2 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 seconds.
Let's go for the 2, shall we?
2 minutes. Okay. AK.
Wow. So many possible threads to continue on this. But I was actually sort of thinking back at the presuppositions that different individuals and also societies make as to what the starting point is. So I'm not familiar with the study that you mentioned, but the presupposition that many Americans would have is that we're all starting from the same point and we're bootstrapping ourselves and we're making our own way. So individuals can do it if, it's up to you. I disagree with it because we all know that people have different types of privileges that will really influence where they actually are able to end up. And bootstrapping, in my opinion, is a myth. No question there, just sort of a general comment. But in thinking about MOOCs, it really amazes me the turn that North American MOOCs took from the CMOOC to the XMOOC to now going toward the privatization of the quote unquote open, which is really disturbing to me. And because of the sort of global context of what we're doing, whether it's in Eurocall or whether it's in MOOCs, I think that as professionals, we need to be mindful of our language and not call things the year of the, fill in the blank, because on a global scale, it might just be a blip. In doing my dissertation lit review, 2013 was heralded as the year of the anti-MOOC, at least in the US. But if you look in China, that was the year of the MOOC for them. So sort of thinking on a global context, it's really important to sort of think about what we're saying and how we're phrasing it. So no comments, just a whole bunch of random thoughts from all the awesome stuff that you provided as a group. And hoping that these types of conversations can continue even past the adjourning of Eurocall.
Great. Okay, can I just have one... Sorry,
go for it.
Could I just jump in a moment?
Sure.
Parisa, this is your first Eurocall in situ?
Second, actually. I attended and presented at Eurocall 2015.
Okay, so what I'd like to ask you is one question. Do you feel now that you have a seat at the table, and are you happy with the table? I know you're going to have dinner soon.
That's a very good question. I really don't know. But I feel hopeful because of these sessions. And I've learned that I should wait and then judge, okay? I feel hopeful, yes. I don't know whether I'm at the table or not, but I think I have a voice and it's getting heard. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mark?
Well, I just was going to make one comment, and it's probably relevant to everyone, about MOOCs, because for me, MOOCs are just a subset of the openness movement, but also of the online movement. And when I hear people, and this is picking up on the point that language matters, how would we ever talk about, oh, face-to-face teaching is no good, or that face-to-face teaching is the best, which some people might actually say. And that's what we're tending to do when we talk about the MOOC. No two MOOCs are the same. Face-to-face teaching is good, it's bad, depends on the context, depends on the teacher. Exactly the same as online learning. So it's extremely unhelpful to refer to MOOCs as this kind of single entity. And if there's one thing, that we have to be much more sophisticated in our language and understanding. Sadly, the word MOOC has kind of got caught. But I hope that that will be something that will change in the near future.
Thank you very much. A final word from anybody on site?
I think it's very difficult to top all of that. Like there was a few times I was like, oh yeah, I could mention something about open access in here, and I was like, no, never mind, he's gone on to something else already. But no, nothing ready to add.
The challenge is out there, isn't it? We have the agency, we just have to take it. You know, we're all members of society. When we talk about what society is like, well, let's grasp the potential of making it as we want it to be.
And I think to follow up on what Mark was saying, I think it's every single one of us have the duty and responsibility to move that movement forward towards openness, towards equality, regardless of what country you're in, to have access to knowledge and information and education. And I think that's something that we all need to work towards us as individual and as a society.
It's all about power, as Claire told us yesterday. We're going to reflect on power, but not until we start drinking some wine. So.
Okay, we better let you get away and drink that wine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sláinte.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.